Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of the Board of NHS England. In accordance with our time-honoured custom, we meet in public, and this is a meeting at which serious decisions are taken. But it's not a public meeting. In other words, we believe that it's appropriate that the population of England should be able to see both in person, and I welcome a number of people who have joined us here in London this morning, but also on our live stream, to see how the board goes about taking decisions that affects the investments that we make on NHS England and on behalf of the public of England. So everybody's very welcome, and we will turn now to the business of the meeting. I should explain that the board works through a number of different methods. This is the meeting in public of the board, but we also have business which is undertaken in committees, and those committees then report to the board. You'll see some of those on the agenda this morning. And we also have development sessions in which the entire board sits around and works to develop policy that is from its earliest stages being worked up into a document that will eventually come to a meeting in public of the board. Just to give some context to that, yesterday we spent some considerable time thinking through our future package for the support of general practice and to develop a model which would accord with the 5-year forward view as we take that through. So also following this meeting we will go into private session to deal with issues that are strictly confidential and can't be aired in public. So let me first of all take apologies for absence. I've only got one, which is Richard Barker, who is our acting Director for Commissioning Operations, to invite the board to give us indications of any declarations of interest of matters on the agenda. Right, Turning Point provides services in Manchester. Thank you, Victor. We'll take a note of that. To advise everybody that there is no fire alarm test scheduled for this morning, so that if the alarm should go, our staff will escort everybody off the premises to a safe place. I turn now to Chairman's preliminary remarks, and my first very pleasant duty is to welcome 2 new non-executive directors to the Board of NHS England. They are respectively Michelle Mitchell and Wendy Becker. Michelle has been working for some time in the voluntary sector, at an earlier career with Age UK, and now as the Chief Executive Officer of Multiple Sclerosis. Wendy Becker joins us as somebody with a very extensive commercial career, but also currently the Deputy Chair of Cancer Research UK. Can I just say it's a great pleasure to welcome you to this first formal meeting of the Board of NHS England. I have to also mention that this is the last meeting of Margaret Casely-Havert, who has been on the board for 4 years. I will say a few more words about that at the end of the meeting under any other business. Next, we're being joined this morning for item 8, which is the business referring to the new delegation arrangements and the new models for care for Manchester, by the Chief Executive of Manchester City Council, Sir Howard Bernstein, who joins us this morning and who will join us for our discussion of that matter. And he's accompanied by Carol Cully, who's the Deputy City Treasurer. So he will speak to the papers on the new Manchester arrangements. Paul Baumann then will talk to the specific paper that we have on the delegation arrangements. So that's all by way of preliminary business. I turn now to the minutes of the previous meeting, in which I have to thank David Roberts for chairing that meeting when I was unwell, and to invite the board to let me have any comments they may have on the minutes. And if you are happy, then to approve them as a fair and accurate report of the meeting. Okay, thank you very much. I turn now then to the report of the Chief Executive. Simon, over to you.
Thank you, Malcolm. I've, with colleagues, had an opportunity over the course of the last month to be out and about around the country, as usual, and want to thank staff and patients in Wigan, Grantham, Lincoln, Lancashire, Barking Havering, and at Preston Prison for their hospitality. And in addition to that, obviously an enormous amount of work has been going on behind the scenes, both to close out the 2015-16 year and to prepare for 16-17. Given that we're always on to the next thing, I do think it is worth the board just for a moment taking stock of the pressures, but also the progress that has been made across the National Health Service in 2015-16, today being the last day of the financial year, and quite rightly a lot of attention publicly paid to the pressures in hospitals, but I think we also have a responsibility to draw attention to the equally important but sometimes less well understood work of GPs, community health teams, mental health services, social care voluntary organisations, and of course patients, families and carers themselves. And that is loosely described sometimes as the out-of-hospital care system, a phrase that I'm not sure I particularly like because it sort of defines the world in a rather stylised and binary way. But the fact is that the impact that all of those parts of the health and care system has a huge impact on the demand that is then felt inside the hospital system. And actually, I think contrary to some understanding, the course of the last year has had some quite interesting features. Emergency admissions up by about 1.5% over the course of the last year, sort of relatively constrained by historical standards. Progress on elective day cases, and hospital inpatient bed days actually about flat to negative so far this year, despite all of the pressures that people are dealing with on delayed transfers of care, which I think is a testament to the successful joint work, again often unremarked, going on between hospitals, GP services, social care, community health services. All of this obviously has been playing out against the backdrop of a difficult 2015 financial year. From the point of view of CCGs and indeed NHS England, we began the year with a £2 billion real funding increase, of which we immediately switched £1 billion to local authorities to help them deal with their social care funding pressures through the Better Care Fund. And as Paul will report, we managed a non-recurring underspend this year of £500 million in order to contribute to the broader financial pressures that the Department of Health is on the hook for, given what's happening in hospital providers. So in effect, of that 2 billion, 1.5 billion is accounted for by the BCF and the managed underspend, meaning that the entirety of all the other pressures that CCGs and indeed our NHS England teams have had to cope with during the course of this year has been dealt with 500 million of extra real terms purchasing power. And from that, we've funded obviously routine demand growth, targeted investments in primary care, local service transformation programs like the Vanguards, sharp increases in specialised treatments, including cancer drugs and NICE mandated hepatitis C treatments. So I do think it is worth the board just taking a moment to thank all of our staff and colleagues who've been involved in the stewardship of what's been quite a financially challenging and complex year, in which nevertheless I do think demonstrable progress has been made on some of our key priorities, such as on the co-produced task forces on cancer and mental health and learning disabilities and maternity services and obesity and type 2 diabetes. And as I say in my report, all of this was overlaid with the additional stimulation of a general election and a comprehensive spending review. So thank you to everybody for 2015-16. Turning on to 2016-17 then, the year ahead, we are today, as we're required to by law, publishing our business plan for the year. We've got a separate item on the agenda that covers that. This is both the operational expression of the requirements that are set for the NHS by the elected government of the day, but also, frankly, it summarises the contribution that we as NHS England will make for the year ahead. And in my forward to it, I set out that clearly there's rightly a lot of focus in the NHS over the coming year on raising performance in the areas most visibly under pressure, A&E, waits for operations, and hospital finances. But I do think it will also be critically important that at the same time we make progress on some other areas, including strengthening GP care, making progress on mental health and prevention, And in order to square that circle, it seems to me that 3 of the guiding principles that should shape our work are that we need to stick with the shared plan that we've got, constancy of purpose and priorities rather than chopping and changing. And that's why, as I say, sharp-eyed readers will notice strong continuity in the priorities in our 16-17 business plan with those from the past year and indeed the year before. That's because these are big fundamental challenges that require action over years, not months. So stick with the plan, constancy of purpose and priorities. Coherent national support between all of the various national bodies, including ourselves, NHS Improvement, other national bodies, HEE, Public Health England, to work locally to support improvement. And the 44 sustainability and transformation planning processes, which are now being kicked off, are part of how we intend to give life to the local versions of the 5-year forward view now through 2020. And that relates to my third point, which is that I think we've got to partly solve today's issues by getting on with tomorrow's solutions. It's not the case that in the name of stability, tempting as it might be, we can just think that this year ahead can be a year of better firefighting. Actually, a lot of the solutions to the real pressures that people are experiencing right now lie in the change programme that we have collectively set out for the years ahead. And so if you think about the pressure on A&Es, then part of the answer there, of course, is redesigned urgent emergency care system spanning the out-of-hospital services as well as the in-hospital services, including 111 GP out-of-hours procurements, community and social care. Part of the answer in primary care, of course, lies in boundary spanning work, bigger multidisciplinary primary care teams, technology-enabled care, the sorts of things that we're going to be talking about in the new GP roadmap that we intend to publish very shortly. So, an enormous programme of work in 16-17, but a sense that the direction is clear. A number of things to land in the next 2 or 3 weeks that Paul will describe in his report in terms of the reconciliation of the activity levels, the funding flows, the link to the £1.8 billion sustainability fund. So a lot of work to be done in the next few weeks, but nevertheless a sense that the direction is now clear. And then finally, I would just mention, Malcolm, the fact that we warmly supported the budget announcement around the so-called sugar tax and the, I think, announcement yesterday by Ironbrew that this is already setting in place the process of reformulation is exactly the kind of action that we want to see more broadly from the sugary fizzy drinks suppliers. And if we get this right, together with a much wider package of action on reformulation, on promotions, on advertising, marketing, combined action by schools, the food industry, local authorities, the NHS and government, then this augurs well for progress on childhood obesity in this country. Why don't I leave it there?
Well, thank you very much, Simon. Let me invite any comments or questions from the board to the Chief Executive. No. Okay. Just 2 things then. I think, first of all, to endorse what Simon said about our thanks to all of those who have helped us come through an immensely difficult year. I always find at this time of the year we're always reflecting on how really difficult last year was, knowing that next year is going to be much more challenging. And we'll be dealing with that and a lot of the other business that's coming to the board today. But we would include, obviously, you and your team in our thanks, Simon. Thank you for all of that. Secondly, just pleased to ask the board to note formally the content of the annex to Simon's report, which is a report of the use of the corporate seal by NHS England over the past year. Okay?